Planning and Community Development Committee of Thursday, June 13, 2019. Acknowledge that we are meeting today within the territory of the Sechelt First Nation. My name is Bill Beamish. I'm the chair. Director Ties is the assistant chair, and who's deputy chair, vice chair, who knows more than I do, so we're good. So that we have an agenda. I don't know if you had a chance. There are some copies on the side table if you'd like to pick one up. We have a number of items to go today, so that I'd like to first of all move adoption of the agenda. If everybody is nothing to add to it, so moves, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. We'll move first of all to delegations and presentations, and I invite the Sunshine Coast Disc Golfing Association. We have Denny Nordley and Kelsey Oxley with us this morning. And for the board, just acknowledge we have one additional piece of paper that we've received here in front of you. So please, Denny, I understand you're speaking first. Please, and use the microphone, please.
Thank you. I'm Denny Nordley, representing the Sunshine Disc Golf Association, or club. I just want to tell you guys a little bit about who we are and what the role of the club is, and then point to some projects that have happened recently in BC and the amount of success that they've had and how. So, the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Club consists of nearly 50 members with experience levels ranging from 40 plus years as a touring professional to beginners. Amongst our group are passionate volunteers with course design and skilled trades experience that, given the opportunity, are more than willing to step up to achieve the club's goals. The role of the club is to continue to be ambassadors of the sport and stewards of the land, increase community involvement by advertising weekly club rounds, and increase involvement from other communities by hosting tournaments. So some notable disc golf projects in BC, one being Powell River. Powell River is one of the fastest growing disc golf scenes in Canada. Their club, having officially started January 2018, soon after their 2 9-hole courses opened to the public, since has grown to over 100 members that make great use of the course regularly. Another project is Raptors Knoll at Jackson Wetlands in Aldergrove. Their volunteers have served more than 2,800 hours, transforming the unused area into a championship-level course. Fundraising and sponsorship efforts total at over $250,000. And lastly, Pender Island. Pender Island is one of the oldest and most historic courses in Canada. It was first built in the 1980s and has since continually expanded and been renovated. It is now a 27-hole course that plays host to the largest disc golf tournament in BC, attracting 300-plus competitors every year and bringing in many tourism dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nordley. And Kelsey Oxley, were you going to say something? And then afterwards, we'll have questions from the board. So thank you.
Good morning, board. My name is Kelsey Oxley, and I'm here with the Sunshine Coast Disc Golf Association. I want to talk specifically about a course proposal we have for Half Moon Bay. As many of you, I'm sure, know, there's a really great course out at Shirley Macy and Gibsons, and we're looking to add a second public course on SCRD lands in Half Moon Bay to make it more accessible to people at the other end of the coast and to residents out there who are looking for an informal activity to do. Disc golf, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a really family-friendly, all-ages accessible sport. There's really low barriers to entry. You just simply need one disc if you really, for the basics, and you can start playing. It's appropriate for all fitness levels. You can just play at your own pace. My husband and I often play with our children. It's open to everyone, easily accessible. The school is right adjacent to the area we're looking at utilizing, and the school is in support. The work I've done so far, I've done a presentation to the Half Moon Bay Community Association, and they've written a letter of support of this project in the area. So that's courtesy of Terry Knight, and I believe that was forwarded to staff. Yeah, into your package as well. So what I wanted to talk about a bit was the area where we're proposing on the map here. Am I able to put that up, please? So for those of you who aren't familiar, Connor Park and Welcome Woods Wilderness Park share a border that is roughly along Fullerton Road in Half Moon Bay. And the reason we're looking at using this area is because there are existing facilities in Connor Parks, most importantly the parking and the bathrooms. And that's where we'd be looking at putting the entrance, and sort of the start of the course would be adjacent to the fields. And then the area that we've identified as potentially using is along the Reservoir Road towards the water tower. And that's in consultation with a horticulturalist that I walked through with. He identified some stands of white pine along the far east border of Connor Park, which some of you may know is actually an endangered tree species. So we want to stay well away from that. And so along the west side of Connor Park, or at the border of Welcome Woods Wilderness Park, there is not white pine, and it's well away from the Sargent Bay watershed, which we also want to avoid. So there's an area along the Reservoir Road which is quite open and would provide plenty of space for disc golf. And so what we're looking for today, our ask, is to further explore that possibility and then look at permissions to begin fundraising and with our volunteer efforts to begin building a disc golf course along an area that's agreeable to everyone. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you for your presentation. And first of all, a motion from the board to receive this additional information received. Moved. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Okay, we'll add that to our package. Questions from the board? Have any questions? Either Kelsey or Denny? Director Pratt.
Just a comment, and just wanted to commend Kelsey and the team for putting this together and doing a lot of the legwork already. I think it's a great community amenity proposal, and really I've talked to Kelsey about it before, and I'm quite excited about it. I think it'd be a great community amenity that's low impact on the environment and provides another great recreation opportunity in the Half Moon Bay area.
Yeah, I think it's disc golf is a great way for people to get outside and enjoy nature, and with fairly low impact. And I just want to. My question is you mentioned the horticulturist, and that's great that you've kind of consulted with him or her. I just want to ask, when you're building the course and building the trails that go from hole to hole, and what considerations you're going to have towards keeping that impact as low as possible.
So the horticulturalist I worked with was Jeff Muckle. So he's a member of the Sargent Bay Trail Society, and he's been involved with Sargent Bay Park for, I think, since the early 90s. He lives adjacent to Connor Park. He's very well acquainted with the area we're looking at. And he is in support of a course development when it's done with correct stewardship. So we'd be looking to mitigate the impacts by using the existing trail network that is there where we can, and then consulting with him and with others who are involved. There's some concern. He and his wife walk their dogs, so they just wanted to be sure that we're consulting with user groups like dog walkers and mountain bikers, which I've spoken to and communicated with Elise Redland and Randy Simons of the local mountain biking groups, and worked with them, and I've walked through with Randy as well about avoiding conflicts with other user groups. And Jeff, the horticulturalist, has agreed that there's more than enough space to accommodate everything, like all the different user groups who utilize the park. We'd like to see more users in that park. Right now it's very, very quiet during the day. And we would, to go back to your question, to mitigate impacts, we would be creating T-pads and holes which would create small footprints around those areas where we would be walking. But otherwise, we'd be there's minimal impacts on the trees. As you can see in Shirley Macy, it's very well maintained. There's very little impact on the forest itself.
Director McMahon?
Thanks. I've noticed more activity at Shirley Macy lately. I do hike through there. I just had to say, this is a real blast from the past, because my very first boyfriend on our very first date in 19 Mumble went to a disc golf course in Tsawwassen. And he followed that up by taking me to a Scrabble tournament. So.
Wonderful. And where is he now? Yeah. I'll just ask a question. How much clearing would be necessary? And I ask this in the context of we were just attended a presentation earlier this week on interface fires and the whole idea of actually opening up space and clearing some of the underbrush and clearing up on trees and stuff like that. That it certainly could be a tie-in with that type of activity to prevent rapid fire spread.
I'm just going to ask Danny to speak to that. I think he can do that better.
Yeah, the beautiful part about disc golf is the trees are the obstacles. If it wasn't for trees, it would be completely boring. So, like you were saying, we just like to take some of the underbrush, maybe twice as tall as a person, that high, with just the lower branches, and then just invasive weeds and stuff off the ground, like blackberry bushes and stuff, just de-root them and clear off the ground, remove debris off to the sides of the playing areas. So very minimal impact to the trees that are there. For the most part, you don't cut down any trees. You just remove some of the lower limbs, and all that does is it opens up the area to anyone or everybody. So areas that you couldn't walk in before, there's just branches and trees and thorns. Now that it's a disc golf hole, everyone, trail users can walk through there, dog walkers, everyone. It just opens up the area for everyone.
And you would remove all of the duff and the branches that you are taking down so that they wouldn't actually become a store or a fire starter in the forest.
Yeah, that's definitely typically you would just kind of move them off of the playing surface onto the side of the fairway. But another great option is to get a wood chipper and that kind of pretties up the area a little bit and removes debris. And
Director Seegers?
Thank you. I didn't have such adventurous boyfriends back in the day. We didn't do the Scrabble tournament either, no. I'd like to make a motion to refer this to staff to work with the proponents here and come back with a proposal and give us guidelines around what we can and can't do with regards to this.
Moved. Seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. There you go. It's moved one step further along.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, Council, we're now moving to reports. And as we do this, I'd like to motion to receive all the reports and minutes that are in our package. Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. First report from the Deputy Corporate Officer, UBCM resolution, BC Ferry service levels and foot passenger service. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
This report is a follow-up to the May 23rd Corporate and Administrative Services Committee recommendation to review the proposed UBCM resolution for BC Ferries. Upon review, 2 resolutions have been prepared, one to advocate for an increase in BC Ferries service levels, and a second to advocate for dedicated foot passenger ferry service.
Thank you. Board, is there any discussion? Director Ties?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of clarify, and maybe Director Beamish can answer that question for me, but I can see where a foot passenger service will actually save emissions if it's in lieu of adding additional ferry capacity. But if BC Ferries is still planning to add additional sailings, then foot passenger service, then would, in my opinion, just add another carbon spewing ferry service into when there's enough capacity on BC ferries to add the foot passengers. So I don't know if the wording should be changed, that instead of adding more car ferry, that we should look to passenger ferries, which would then save a lot of fuel. But if BC Ferries still plans to go ahead with their service expansion, and then we want a foot passenger service on top of that, I really don't see the emission savings.
You're looking for me to respond. But I think that as we heard at AVICC, BC Ferries is looking at alternate energy for their ferries. So looking at something that could even be electric for a smaller boat sort of thing, or natural gas. The other thing a foot passenger ferry does is it removes the need for people to either travel from the lower mainland out to Horseshoe Bay and get on a ferry and come across in a vehicle, or even to park their vehicle in Horseshoe Bay and maybe pick up a ferry elsewhere. I don't know what the system would look like. It could be from Vancouver, it could be from Horseshoe Bay. So could potentially be in the longer term, fewer vehicles coming this way, fewer vehicles going that way. Right now, as we heard from the president of BC Ferries, is that they don't have the ability to even look into the service. So the option of them to then consider a service in the long term and what that service would look like would be something we would have input into, I'm sure. I'm not speaking on behalf of BC Ferries. Thank you. Other, Director McMahon?
No, I'm very happy with the motions as drafted. I think they're well worded, and we're not actually binding BC Ferries to anything here. We're indicating the direction that we would like them to go, and so I think this does the job.
I think as well, with the agreement of this board, I'd like to bring this forward to the Gibson's Council. There's a direction they are thinking in as well, and I don't see us needing to duplicate resolutions to UBCM. And the details of how they do it, I know that our council would encourage alternate fuel transportation methods as opposed to oil or gas. So I think that if it's okay, I will bring this forward to my board. And the decision we have to make today, though, is that the draft resolution be approved and submitted to UBCM prior to June 30th, and the recommendation be forwarded to the June 13th board meeting for adoption. Do you have a motion? Motion moved, seconded? Seconded, all in favor? I should ask for further discussion, but all in favor? Thank you. That's approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is the senior planning zoning amendment, bylaw 310, for consideration, third reading and adoption, and this refers to the Toma subdivision, and this is rural area B and rural planning voting only. So who will bring that forward? Mrs. Hale or
Thank you, Chair Beamish. This report summarizes the result of public hearing for this rezoning application and addresses several key issues of the development. The proposed density increase from 7 to 10 lots is supported by policies of the OCP and will result in a net increase of only 2 dwellings. The design of the proposed community sewage system has been accepted by Vancouver Coastal Health, and it can treat wastewater to a high standard before wastewater is released to the absorption field or reach the potential breakout point. To further contain potential breakout, an additional covenant area must be in place before adoption of the bylaw. So a separate development permit has addressed requirements for wildlife protection on the site, and the applicant is also required to obtain a wildlife permit through the province before final approval of the subdivision. Regarding potential future mortgage, through the referral process with the province, the SCRD will have an opportunity to comment on mortgage applications and recommend best management practice. So staff recommend the bylaw proceed to third reading. Thank you.
Thank you for your report and presentation. Directors, discussion? Director Pratt?
I'll just comment, having been the director for the area, as well as having attended the public meeting that Director Lee chaired, and also this being our first public hearing of this board. It was a good process, and thank you very much to staff for setting that up. I believe a lot of the concerns that were addressed, that were brought forward by the community, have been addressed by the developer and within the recommendations from staff. So I'm actually happy to move it forward at this time. I know the concerns have been heard very clearly by the developer. I'm confident of that, and it was, yeah. So I'm happy to move it forward.
Okay, Director McMahon?
Yeah, I just had a question about wildlife protection, because it says here that the applicant is required to obtain a wildlife permit through the province, and there's been, I know, some protection set up for other sites, but I've had a number of emails lately about eagle nesting trees in Elphinstone, and what happens, I think, is that owners come and owners go, and people forget that there's protections in place, and so I was just wondering what sort of ongoing protection is available over the course of time.
Staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamish. There are a number of opportunities to address. If somebody has a property and there is no ongoing development in terms of rezoning or subdivision, they are bound by the Wildlife Act provincial regulation. There are examples at the time of covenant at the time of subdivision where covenants are required. A distinct example would be Daniel Point in Pender Harbor, where there are circular shaped park dedications which were based around buffers around established wildlife trees. There are other areas where, say, rezoning, we would divert development away from particular areas. So it really depends on the type of development that we're facing. But if it's an individual's residential property and simply what is happening is a change of ownership and the new owner hasn't yet figured it out, it is ultimately provincial regulation that provides protection to the tree. Thank you.
Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair Beamish. Reading through the public hearing, it seems like most of the concerns are about, or many of the concerns are about the wastewater. So I'm kind of wondering about the process in terms of the land hasn't been subdivided. The restrictive covenant will cover land which will then become subdivided first. That's kind of how I see it, is the land isn't subdivided. So you do the restrictive covenant, then you go through the final approval. So that's the one piece. And then there's another piece which goes back to the March 14th report, and it was where Modi was asking for the SCRD to hold funds to ensure that the road construction is complete. So I'm wondering if these two pieces tie together in some way, the restrictive covenant, the completion of the road network, and the funding, and how all these pieces sort of fit together.
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. So regarding the question about the covenant, so it will be the covenant is for the additional sewage breakout area, so it will be have to be registered on title before the bylaw can be adopted. So it will be registered for the entire parcel. And once it's subdivided, it will be a strata subdivision, so it will remain with the property. The second question regarding the MOTI requirements. So it has been worked through the subdivision requirement, which is a separate application that is separate from the rezoning application. Thank you.
Director Hill, does that answer your question?
Well, a little bit more about will the SCRD be attempting to hold funds for the construction? I guess it's not directly on point on this application, but it's related. So I'm interested in, is the SCRD going to hold funds?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. SCRD very frequently holds funds, and I can think of one comparable in Roberts Creek where we did so. And as part of subdivision approval review, we provided a report to the board with complete analysis seeking policy direction on whether or not the board wishes to do so. And so that would be a separate report. Thank you.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. A follow-up to Director McMahon's question with regards to wildlife protection. In the documentation indicates that they have to obtain a wildlife permit. Is that something that's registered on title, or is it just something that the owner actually has? So how does a new owner actually know if it isn't then registered on title?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. Quick conference here. A wildlife permit is ultimately registered or issued by the province, so I'm not entirely certain if it's registered on title. However, the issuance of a development permit, which may reference the tree and the protection of the tree, is in fact issued by SCRD and registered on title. So we believe there is protection there. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Director Pratt, did you want to move the two recommendation forward? Yes, seconder. Okay, so the recommendations are that the zoning amendment bylaw 310-180, 2018 be forwarded to the board for consideration of third reading, and that consideration of adoption of the Sunshine Coast Regional District zoning amendment with the following conditions be met. The applicant registers on title of a separate subject parcel to designate an additional area south of the community septic field to contain potential effluent breakout. I guess the question I have is, does that want to come forward to this afternoon's meeting? No rush for that. Okay. So the recommendations stand. All in favor? Or any discussion of the recommendations first? Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. Okay. So the next is Senior Planner again, and this is the Egmont-Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw, number 708.1, 2019, Electoral Area A Zoning Amendment Bylaw, number 337.116, 2019, consideration for third reading and adoption, Pender Harbor Ocean Discovery Station, and back to the Senior Planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. This report addresses feedback from the public hearing and several key issues for the development. The public feedback received so far indicates that there is a broad community support for the POTS development, and many community members believe that POTS can provide significant environmental, economic, social, and cultural benefits for the Sunshine Coast, compared to a commercial development that could be built under the current zoning. The POTS proposal is smaller in scale, range of uses, and intensity, and requires fewer parking spaces, and as such, more compatible with the surrounding residential environment. The bylaw amendments for this location are supported by policies of the OCP. The proposed parking strategy to divert parking to other locations and provide bus and boat shuttle service can reduce traffic on the road system and minimize impact on the neighborhood. As a condition for adoption of the bylaws, the applicant must enter into a covenant with the SCRD to ensure parking solutions are in place for the facility. So staff recommend that the bylaws proceed to third reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll go first to Director Lee. Do you have any comments, Director Lee?
Yes. First of all, the public hearing was well attended and quite interesting. And thanks for Director Pratt to chair that for me. I didn't do a very good job of timing, but she kept catching me. Those darn smartphones are too hard to use. I believe the developer here, the PODS developer, has gone well out of their way to try to mitigate the concerns of the local residents. By local residents, I mean the immediate residents in the closest subdivision. They've moved the building over a little bit, made it a little lower, provided sight lines. I too am concerned about parking, but there's ways of mitigating it, and hopefully the plan works and people will take boats to get there. Be nice if they did. Maybe sailboats, Andreas? On probabilities, I'm definitely in support of this, and I'd like to see it proceed.
Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to address recommendation 3A, where it says at all times when the auditorium is operational, a minimum of 39 off-street parking spaces shall be provided in suitably zoned locations other than the subject parcel, and shuttle services shall be provided between these locations and the subject parcel. When I read that, I'm worried that we'll have a shuttle driving around empty just because the auditorium is either hosting a private party where all the parking is already on site, or the occupancy of the auditorium is not high enough to even fill up half the parking lot of the 51 spaces that are already available. So I find this requirement overly prescriptive, and I'm wondering if it could be amended to something like if there are less than 5 spaces available within the auditorium, within the available parking on site, that then the shuttle will be starting the operations, and maybe there could be a Twitter account associated with that, where they're saying, okay, we're reaching capacity on our on-site parking, start moving to the alternative spaces, that kind of thing, because and then I think once they start figuring out what their occupancy load is going to be, I'm sure there'll be times in November and December when the auditorium is operational when they'll never need a shuttle. And a shuttle uses a lot of fuel. It takes a lot to maintain it. It would be a cost of tens of thousands of dollars throughout the year. So I think that there should be some flexibility given so that they can run that shuttle when it's actually necessary and not when it's not. And so that was my concern about this one, and maybe we can reword that into something like if there are less than 5 spaces available, that the shuttle starts operation at that point.
Staff, would you care to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamish. We'd just like to point out the intent of this recommendation is not to prescribe business operations or be overly detailed. And one slight amendment might be, rather than shall be provided, could be changed to shall be available, and then discretion can be used when that shuttle service is then implemented. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll move that amendment. That sounds like a good one.
Okay, there's no motion on the table, so we can amend now. Director Lee, do you have any comment on that? That would be in 31A, 3IA, 31A.
I agree with Director Tees that we shouldn't be forcing something that isn't required, so I like the amendment.
So available, okay. Director Hills?
Just, is there a motion right now, or are we still doing questions?
Right now. Still discussing the report.
A question of staff, then?
Yeah.
It's related to it, and MOTI is supposed to be involved in putting up no parking signs. Is the regional district have any way to ensure that the MOTI puts on those parking signs as part of this solving the parking or mitigating the parking issues?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. SCRD does not have authority to require that the Ministry of Transportation puts up no parking signs, but through a good working relationship and with input from the community, in practice, the regional district has had success in coordinating those with the ministry. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you. So just a few comments, because I do recognize that there are concerns within the adjacent subdivision, and especially around their privacy. And so the no, or the private area, the no parking signs, I think will really help to mitigate that. I will say, having been somebody who had been at the previous iteration when it was a commercial entity as the Irving's Landing pub, there was a lot of noise back then. So I understand it's been a very quiet, sleepy area for probably a couple of decades now. With because it was a long time ago that it was since it's been operational as a pub. So I'm really in support of what's going on here with pods, with the development, with the hopefully the economic becoming an economic driver, but also an education hub for the Sunshine Coast, which is really something we've been hearing across the coast in that continuing education. We've got so many fantastic resources here. So I heard the concerns loud and clear, though. So really urge staff to work on that private property signage around the Dames area, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this come to fruition. So good job.
Okay, Director Lee, would you like to move the recommendations with the change in 32A, that if the word provided be replaced by available?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Seconded. And this is rural directors only, so any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's approved. Thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is Annex E. And this is a development variance permit, DBP 00046. It's in electoral area F. And Senior Planner to present, please.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. This variance application is for increasing floor area of a proposed auxiliary dwelling at 952 Marine Drive from 55 to 61 square meters. The proposed cabin will be located on the wooded portion of the large lot in this block. So it will be positioned in between trees to avoid cutting of trees. The proposed variance meets all criteria for variance considerations. It is minor and it has no negative impact on the surrounding. The variance can help to provide the homeowner an affordable housing option that is well integrated into the existing neighborhood and the natural environment. Therefore, staff recommend approval of this development variance permit. Thank you.
Director Hiltz, would you like to comment?
Sure. Thanks, Chair Beamish. Yes, I'm in support of the permit, the DDP. The proponents came to the APC, did a presentation, brought along a neighbor as well. They've talked to the neighbors. They have a good relationship in the neighborhood. It's a very small increase in size, and what's really interesting is how they're trying to work with the site on the proposal of the house using the built-up stilts is to kind of minimize the effects on the ground and the trees, which will minimize the damage to the trees. So yeah, I'm in full support of that.
Other directors in comment? Okay, seeing none, would you move the recommendations, Director?
Yes, I'll move the recommendations as presented.
Okay, second? Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. That's approved. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to Annex F, which is the development permit application, DP 00075 for Gibson's Ready Mix and Gain Electoral Area F. And that'll be presented by Mr. Jackson. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. SCRD has received a development permit application for Form and Character to develop a concrete batch plant. This application follows a recent rezoning to permit a concrete batch plant at this location, for which Amendment Bylaw number 310.175 was adopted on April 25th of this year. The subject site is located in the northeast corner of Electoral Area E and includes two irregular-shaped, unaddressed parcels, which are bound by undeveloped Sunshine Coast Highway Bypass Extension Road allowance to the south and southeast, and with Gilmore Road to the east, about 130 meters away. This application will involve the relocation of Gibson's Ready Mix from their current site at 1327 Fitchett Road in Elphinstone, where a small lot, strata, and mobile home development is proceeding. The proposed building would be used for storage, office, and operations of Gibson's Ready Mix. Through the development permit process, staff have reviewed the application to ensure that the building form and character, site landscaping, and signage conform with the Elphinstone Rural Industry Development Permit Area Number 7 design guidelines. Additionally, staff have received a dust management plan that includes rainwater collection for the purposes of mitigating dust created from the operations. Staff are recommending that development permit be issued. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And although the agenda says F, I believe it's E. So, Director McMahon, do you have a comment?
That's correct. It is E. I didn't catch that. Very good. I think I'm glad to see this moving ahead. I've had some communication from residents on Fitchett who are having quite a lot of trouble with the dust, created by the operation of Ready Mix in a residential neighborhood. And so I think moving to this other location will be an improvement. To be very nitpicking, on page 72 I saw a reference to planting a cedar hedge, and I just wanted to point out that cedar hedges are dying all over the Sunshine Coast. It's not any longer such a great idea. We need to find some more drought-tolerant plants that folks can use instead of cedar. I also just wanted to ask, we've set out some, or the proponent has come up with a dust management plan. Who monitors this?
Staff.
Thank you, Chair. Through the covenant that's registered on title, the applicant's obligated to ensure that they uphold the dust management plan that has been prepared. Essentially, it would be the SCRD that if we were to receive a complaint that they weren't following it, that we would be the ones that would then enforce and ensure that they were following all of the stuff outlined in the covenant.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, and there is also a dust question with the truck traffic, certainly along Fitchett. So presumably it would increase the traffic on Keith and Cemetery and Payne. considerably. So if there's dust issues there, does that become Modi's problem?
Staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamish. In a sense, yes, if you're traveling on the public and maintained roads, Modi and the contractor would work together to identify a solution, but public roads are maintained by Modi and Corus and Capilano. Thank you.
Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair Beamish. Just a couple points of clarification. On page 75 and 76, the proponent's drawings call this a garden nursery. And I'm just wondering if that's left over from a previous, we're talking a batch plant, so I'm just making sure we're talking about the same application here. Like, I don't see it as a nursery. So just, that's a clarification. And, it goes with, BC assessment and verifying what the building is. So the accuracy is important. I'm going to go back to Director McMahon, and I also have a concern about the cedar hedging as a proposal. Dieback of cedars is a very common issue. This is a gravel pit. It doesn't have topsoil. Typically, the topsoil is gone. It's hot. It's dry. It's not serviced by regional district water. I would, perhaps we could maybe encourage staff to work with the proponent to come up with an alternative, because once the cedars die, would they be obligated to put the cedars back? In Area F, they used a fence rather than hedging cedars. So there might be something. And the other question is the silo. How does the silo work in terms of the mitigation from visual effects? It looks like it might be over 11 meters high. I don't know how high the silo is, so those are kind of the questions. The garden nursery, the cedars, and then the silo.
Thank you, staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamish. It is in fact labeled garden nursery by the applicant's engineer and design consultant, and that's true. However, we will be proceeding towards permits, issuing permit for concrete batch plant and not issuing permit for garden nursery. But thank you. Respecting the cedars, we will note that in our review and our ongoing finalizations of the development permit. Also respecting silo, we will have further discussions with the applicant, look at elevation drawings and determine impacts and mitigation options. Thank you.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I just had one further question. Has there been ongoing communication with the owner of the RV park adjacent? I mean, are they aware of this going on?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. At present, we have not had ongoing communication. There was communication from another neighbor moving towards the culmination of the rezoning process. However, in the last few months, we haven't had communication with any neighbors at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, if I may. Is there a septic field going to be associated with this building?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There would be a septic field for the building. There'll be employees and office spaces in the proposed building, so there will be a septic field associated with this.
Okay. And the second thing is just to comment on traffic again. The increasing amount of industrial traffic heading up into that direction, and of course, half of the Pratt Road is the town of Gibson's, and half of Pratt Road, half of Reed Road is the town of Gibson. So, I noticed sitting with the neighbor's porch the other night. A lot of heavy traffic and noisy traffic on Pratt Road at that location going north, heading for the ferry. And I wonder if there's any way that kind of traffic can be mitigated through which is quasi-residential with more houses going in that area, more development. And then this is our Gibson's aquifer recharge area. And I'm very concerned with what goes on up there. And if you look at the picture on page 71, there's more and more industrial activity going on up there. And I'd be concerned with both the nature of septic tanks going on. We didn't get a referral on the zoning on this, you recall at the time. And just the amount that's going there, and BA blacktop creates a contaminated site when it's made or stored. automatically. Other activities, I'm just concerned, and I wouldn't mind having some kind of a sense of comfort of the analysis of what kind of industrial activity is going on within the aquifer recharge area, what materials are being stored, what risks are being taken up there. Is that possible?
Thank you for the questions, Chair. I can speak at a high level about the selection of the location. The Elphinstone Official Community Plan designates this area as rural industry, understanding it's a bit of a transition between the rural residential and into industry. This one being located immediately adjacent to Elphinstone Aggregates provides a bit of a hub area for industrial and consolidates that area. And there is a trade-off, of course. The residents at Fitchett Road in Elphinstone are keen to see it be relocated. That particular area is in the well recharge for our Chaster well. So there's, we're looking at trade-offs and improving the scenario where possible, understanding there are limitations for this location as well. Dust control management, sharing of driveway access roads with adjacent parcels, et cetera, are some of the areas that we're looking at for mitigation. However, those are some of the features we're looking at, but continue our analysis. Thank you.
Very often with industrial sites, you'll find the storage of fuels. Rather than running to the garage station every time to fill a truck up or equipment up, there's fuel storage. I'd just like to know for sure that those are being properly bunkered and protected from spills. That if there's any spill of fuel, it doesn't actually have access to the aquifer, whether it's this year or 10 years from now, it does take. So seeing that those are properly protected would be a great more sense of comfort for myself and the town of Gibsons. So that at some point in time, I'd appreciate the opportunity to hear about that, to hear what is being stored there, what kind of volumes are being stored. And I've dealt with that in other communities, and I'd just like to know what's happening in that industrial area, in our recharge area. So, Director McMahon.
And further to Director Beamish, I have heard from some residents some concerns about the operation of the aggregate business up there, as it has expanded considerably over the years. And so having more information about that site would be really helpful, and more information about what oversight there is. The burner there is another concern that some residents have raised with me, that it's not being operated at high enough temperatures to keep the smoke to a minimum. And so there are, and I also heard some concerns about diversion of streams. So I would definitely appreciate more information about the operations up there and how they are supervised.
Director Hills.
Thanks, Chair. On page 71, there's the drawing, and it's the access agreement to Keith Road. Does this form part of this permit application, and there's also the issue about the private hydrant and fire protection for the facility? So I'm just wondering if they tie together.
Thank you. In relation to the access easement agreement, the applicant has worked with the adjacent landowner to the west to secure a legal access easement agreement over their property. So that area is actually outlined. That was done as part of the rezoning is when they secured that. So that was related to them having this land use on the site. In relation to the water service connections and fire hydrants, the applicant will have to provide an SCRD service that would allow for fire protection to the site. They are currently working with our infrastructure services on that. There's two potential options for them, one from Gilmore Road and one involving getting statutory rights-of-ways through the adjacent property to the west to extend an existing line. So one of those two options would ultimately be pursued by the applicant.
Okay, directors, there is again, this is rural planning. There is recommendations on page 69. And I'll turn to Director McMahon, being Area E. You care to move those recommendations? Okay, moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. That's been approved. Thank you. Okay, now turn to our Annex G, which is the planner public participation phase 2 of zoning bylaw 310 update. Again, this is a rural planning voting. Ms. Clark, turn to you. There you are. You're up there. You're no longer Mr. Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. The project to review and update zoning bylaw 310 continues. This bylaw applies to electoral areas Half Moon Bay, Roberts Creek, Elphinstone, and West Howe Sound. Phase 2 of 3 of public participation to inform the bylaw update ran from November 2018 to May 2019 and is now complete. Phase 2 included a series of public meetings in December 2018, as well as an online questionnaire this spring. In addition, information campaigns were run for the weeks before each of the public meetings and the questionnaire to promote the key opportunity summary, which was a backgrounder on each of the main areas of focus. The summary paper included the questions that we would later use in discussion at the meetings, as well as in the online questionnaire. This approach was designed to allow residents time to research, discuss, and prepare their own responses in advance, as well as any questions they had for us. The public meetings were attended by a total of 87 people. The online questionnaire was filled out by 826 individuals. The public participation summary is presented here for your review. The intention of the public participation report is to provide a record of feedback, both for the benefit of the board and the community in preparation for an initial draft of the new zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, and thank you for the very comprehensive nature of the report, too. I'd like to ensure that all communities are doing this level of public participation, and it's something we'd like to achieve in Gibson, so thank you. Directors, discussion. There is a recommendation to just be forwarded to the Squamish Nation and the District of Sechelt and the town of Gibsons for their information. Is there anything further, Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair Beamish. Thanks to staff. Keep moving it along. It's a lot, and what's really striking for me is the public participation on the online versus the in-person. And is this kind of a trend that we're seeing in general, that it's hard to get people to come out, and the online is becoming more and more of the tool for public participation? So just a little bit of a comment. The stats are really useful in terms of how people are responding. So I'm finding it really useful. So I'm just interested in a little bit about that difference between in-person versus the online, and any observations you're making in that.
Planner? Staff?
Thank you for the question. The differences between the two types of processes are that obviously the online participation allows for both allow for wide participation. The online provides you the opportunity and the convenience of your own space and on your own timeline to provide comment. The in-person engagement allows a different opportunity. It allows a more nuanced opportunity of discussion, and that was the real intention behind the design and the format of those meetings. We initiated each of those 4 meetings with a short presentation on each of the topics that provided some information to those who came, and then allowed small group discussion with members of our planning team as well as the consultants. And it was really quite an exchange. There were lots of questions, and allowed that opportunity for people to have the back and forth and a bit more of a nuanced discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. Just to add to Ms. Clark's comments, major projects, all major projects that have a public participation component begin in SCRD with the completion of a public participation framework analysis that would identify the goals, the business needs of participation, and that might guide staff to recommend a particular type of participation, or as in this case, a blend to be able to, as Julie pointed out, receive the benefits of both different types of participation. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Well, I've got to say I really enjoyed that report, and I reported on it to the Elphinstone Community Association last night. I was very happy to see all the support for carriage houses, because that was one of the questions that I was asked when I was knocking door to door, was why can't we have carriage houses? And my favorite suggestion was about the roving stud roosters. That seems like a great idea. I was wondering, and this is a little outside of the scope of the public engagement part, but we have talked a little bit about development permit areas and having new types of development permit areas, possibly around fire hazard, requiring certain sorts of building. And I'm interested in the question of whether it's possible to do development permit areas around stormwater risk, because there are a number of areas in Elphinstone that are prone to severe flooding and getting worse. And I'm wondering if we should look at that at all.
Staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair Beamish. The West Howe Sound Official Community Plan does have a development permit area which pertains to aquifer protection and stormwater management, and there could be a similar development permit area within the Elphinstone Official Community Plan. The Local Government Act ties back to a number of reasons for which you can have a development permit area. That one we tied back to protection of the natural environment. There are other ones which were referenced in recent staff reports pertaining to water conservation. So there are a number of factors which can be utilized, and our system to date has been to include development permit areas within official community plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers?
So this is a slightly different question than what we're looking at here. Why do we have two zoning bylaws? I mean, I honestly don't know the answer, so I'm asking. Why do we have a separate zoning bylaw for electoral area A than we do for the rest of the coast? Yeah. Good. That's what I'm looking for.
Mr. Allen, you're on the spot.
Special.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. Inasmuch as I have been here for a number of years and occasionally relied upon for historical facts, I will assume what I'm about to say is true and not historical revisionism. My understanding is at one point there was bylaw number 96, which applied broadly throughout all electoral areas. And then there was briefly a bylaw number 264, which essentially was the premise of bylaw 310, but it was amended after a couple of years to introduce the West Howe Sound and Elphinstone OCPs, original OCPs, and their policies. When the regional board went from bylaw 96 to bylaw 264, electoral area A, and the director at the time said, no thank you, carry on with bylaw number 96. 96 contained an infamous R3 zone in Pender Harbor, which was several pages long and allowed many uses, including commerce. So anything commerce related was permitted. I think nuclear fission was perhaps expressly prohibited, but virtually everything else was permitted. And there was a desire to retain that, and there are folks in Pender Harbor today who still lovingly refer to the old R3 zone. And so historical, political decisions is the short answer. Thank you.
Director Seegers?
So is that something that planning is looking at perhaps addressing going forward? I know it creates issues for the planning department and people in the community. Has that ever been a conversation that's been pursued?
Staff, if you can.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. It is not within the scope of this particular work plan. However, our thought would be, as we modernize and update our regulations, to put into the future bylaw replacing 310, respecting carriage houses, respecting residential agriculture, etc., we can utilize those as a policy framework for review of zoning bylaw 337, and then at that time make a decision of 2 similar bylaws or perhaps more. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
Yes, I had a question about focus groups. I wanted to know how they're going to work. Will they be by invitation? Will they be random citizens or representative of groups such as the Farmers Institute? Is there any plan?
Staff?
Thank you for the question. The plan for the focus groups at this point is a sector-based invitation, along with the opportunity for others, such as community associations, to participate.
Thank you. See no further questions. There is a recommendation on page 77 that the public participation phase 2 be shared with the Sechelt Nation, the Squamish Nation, Town of Gibson's, District of Sechelt, and advisory committees for their information. Somebody care to move that? Moved, seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much, and thank you for your report. Thank you. Next, we'll move to Annex H, which is Parks Planning Coordinator, Secret Cove Falls Recreation Site. Again, this is Community Parks, A, B, D, E, and F. Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. This report revisits SCRD involvement in Secret Cove Falls Recreation Site, also referred to as Homesite Creek. In January 2019, the board adopted a resolution to decline the renewal of a partnership agreement with the province for the recreation site. At that time, the province had anticipated entering into partnership with the group responsible for maintaining Homesite Creek Campground. This change in partner for Secret Cove Falls would have no material change in user experience. The SCRD has since been informed by the Recreation Sites and Trails BC that the prospective partnership agreement has not materialized for Secret Cove Falls. SCRD has also been informed that without a partnership, the site would be disestablished as a recreation site. While the trails would remain in place, implications of disestablishment are a lessening of the ability to seek protection of recreation values from industrial or commercial activities in the area. With this new information, staff are bringing forward 3 options. 1, maintain the decision to not continue as a partnership agreement holder for the site. 2, continue as a partnership agreement holder, undertaking all management activities. Or 3, seek out a community volunteer partner to support the maintenance of the recreation site, similar to what has been done for Sprockets. Once a community partner is established, enter into a partnership agreement with the province and a supporting memorandum of understanding with the community group.
Thank you. Directors, Director McMahon first.
I'm just going to say that it really feels like Parks and Recreation BC is trying to abandon the Sunshine Coast. We really have very, very little service here. We have secret and abandoned provincial parks, like Mount Richardson being a wonderful example. And it seems like they're pulling back from everything they do here. Is this province-wide, or are we, special? I kind of have to wonder. Is there any way that we can put some more pressure on Parks and Recreation to up their game? Because our service level here is dismal.
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. So in answering the question, staff would also request to clarify that provincial recreation sites are typically established at the request of communities. And so if I understand the history of this particular site, it was established as a recreation site at the request of residents. And so the responsibility for maintaining it as such continues to rest with some partner. However, I guess more generally, staff would agree that there appear to be challenges in the capacity of Recreation Sites and Trails BC, but are not able to provide any further detail about whether those are local or provincial, or any specific strategies beyond general advocacy for improved services that might be recommended at this time. Thanks.
If I may comment as well, this might be an opportunity for either a meeting with staff or a meeting with Minister at UBCM to raise an issue which we'll be talking about later today. Director Pratt.
I was just going to echo Director McMahon's comments. It is disappointing to see so many downloading of costs from the province, and if we, as the regional district, were to take this on, we're not covered in the same way that a volunteer group would be, like, for example, with the insurance. I think that's the one that really stuck out to me. So we're really, if we take this on, we don't get any support from the province. It feels like we're not getting any support from the province. But if we have a partnership with volunteers, then they're covered underneath the insurance from the province. So it is disappointing. I would like to see some further advocacy there. It feels like we're getting missed on so many levels from the province on so many provincial funding plots, and I would like to see this go forward further, whether it be with our MLA or at UBCM.
Further, Director McMahon, follow up?
Yeah, I've had some conversation with trail volunteers, and they have some concerns about the way that we are trying to set up trail management partnerships. I'm not sure that I really want to go into that here and now, but I think it needs to be a broader conversation about how we work with the community and how we work with volunteers, because they're feeling sort of like they're getting downloaded all the work and not having any real say in the decisions that are being made about how these sites are managed. And we have a lot of issues around things like liability, where volunteer groups have stepped up and asked to do things, to build things, to participate in projects, and being turned down. So I'd like to have a broader conversation about that at a future time.
Director Ties and then Director Seegers.
I note all these comments, and I'm wondering if either Director Pratt or Director McMahon would want to think about a resolution, a UBCM resolution in that regard or something. But that's just a question. At this point, I'd like to move option number 1 on page number 160, enter into a new partnership agreement for Secret Cove Falls with a supporting memorandum of understanding with a community volunteer partner group. And that's my motion.
Okay, is seconded? Moved? Is it seconded? Okay. It was seconded? Okay, good. So discussion, thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, clarity on the motion. Are you looking at the motion on page 158 as presented, or did you put something else forward?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay, so then I have a question for staff around that motion. On page 160, the option number 1 says enter into a partnership agreement with the supporting memorandum with the community volunteer partner group, and then approach the province to go into, to make sure that they're okay with that, basically. If we actually look at the recommendation, I read the recommendation saying that even pending confirmation of that, we actually go into the agreement with the BC government. So what happens with the timing of this, and what if we don't actually find somebody in the community to take it on? Have we then signed on to this and we have the full responsibility for maintenance? Or are we actually going to see if we can find a partnership group before we actually sign a memorandum of understanding?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. The first step in the process would be to seek out a partner within the community. There has been, in conversation, it looks like there is some interest in the community, potentially, so we would seek that out. If we are able to come to agreement around what the maintenance and management responsibilities would be, at that time we would move forward with a partnership agreement with the province.
Director McMahon?
So why are we in the middle? Why wouldn't the community group partner directly with the province?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair Beamish. The community groups were approached by the province and were not interested in entering into a direct partnership agreement.
Director McMahon?
Final comment is that there may have to be some money on the table in order for the community groups to have the capacity to take on the required work. That's just what I'm hearing. So that's just an awareness thing.
Thank you. We have a motion. I've clarified with Director Tyers that he has intended to move the three recommendations that are on page 158, and they were moved and seconded. And any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. No opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Just before we move on, in regards to the question around the advocacy piece for UBCM, I think hold on to that thought for right now, and maybe in discussion with staff, and we might be able to further. I don't necessarily know if we want to bring it to this UBCM or learn more about the issue and what's going on in other jurisdictions first, and then go on from there.
Yeah. Director Lee?
I just have a general question. I'm wondering which budget pays for the staff work that's required to monitor the trails and that kind of thing. Is that of the general parks, or where does it come from?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, provincial recreation sites for which SCRD has involvement are managed as part of the community parks function, for which all rural electoral areas are participants. Thank you.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. Following up on Director Pratt's comment with regard to the UBCM piece, given that it's a deadline of June 30th for resolutions, perhaps we could put forward a motion to have staff investigate if this is something that's been addressed already with UBCM, or how we could maybe move the advocacy piece forward. Should it be a resolution, or should it be a meeting with the minister? They've actually, as you know, they've already come out and said, we're looking for you to schedule meetings. We can schedule meetings now. We can cancel them down the road should we need to do that.
You're suggesting schedule a meeting. We're not looking at a UBCM resolution, just a meeting schedule.
Both.
Both resolution.
Both
okay.
at this point.
Yeah. So that resolution then to ask staff, or staff.
Staff investigate a resolution around.
Okay.
Basically downloading from parks to regional districts.
Okay.
And book a meeting with the appropriate minister for UBCM.
Moved and seconded. We'll be talking about the meeting bookings, I think, later today. But
Just a question for staff, if that's clear enough direction at this time.
Do Do you need a resolution then, or do you do direction?
No, I think that's it. We've got the motion on the floor. I think I'm good with that.
Take the motion, okay. All in favor? Thank you. I'm mindful of the time. We don't have a lot of heavy things on the rest of this agenda. Does anybody need a break right now, or do you want to go through till...
Never say that, Bill.
Yeah, sorry?
Never say that.
Well, I'll give you the... Yeah, I know. All right, do a break right now for... Okay, motion to adjourn for 5 minutes. Okay, we are adjourned then for 5 minutes. Thank you. Our 10. With the meeting, and we're now on Annex I, which is the Gibson's District Fire Protection Commission minutes of May 3, 2019. And I believe that Fire Chief is here, but Director McMahon and Director Hiltz were also attended that meeting. And we have received these minutes, so that is there anything that I would like to, Director McMahon?
Yeah, this may have come up before. It was some weeks ago. But I'm still a little concerned that the purpose as outlined in the proposed terms of reference is out of alignment with the purpose in bylaw 448.
Okay, that's the next item we're going to be talking
Okay.
about. Okay. If we could do that. Anything on the minutes? Okay, nothing arising from the minutes. Then we'll go to Annex J, which is the terms of reference. And the draft updated terms of reference is there to look at. So now, Director McMahon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, there were two items. One is under the purpose. It says to provide information to the elected officials located in West Howe Sound Fire Protection District. But in bylaw 448, it says the commission shall be responsible for fire policy on fire protection services and for making recommendations on fire commission bylaws for the Gibson's West Howe Sound Fire Protection area, which, to my reading is considerably broader scope. The other thing that just struck me as a bit odd was in 4.6, under the committee in carrying out its mandate, item E is preserves and enhances the unique mix of natural ecosystems and green spaces in the SCRD. And that's an admirable goal. I just wasn't quite sure what it had to do with the Fire Commission.
Okay, staff, please.
Thank you, Chair Beamish. I will do my best to offer information about this subject matter, not having attended the meeting. With regards to the terms of reference, these, as presented, they are based on SCRD's standard terms of reference template that is applied for all of our advisory bodies. And as one particular note, there is a housekeeping item that it should, throughout the terms of reference, consistently use commission, not committee. But that note aside, with regards to 4.6, those points A through G are included in all of our terms of reference to link to values as expressed in, amongst other documents, the strategic plan. And generally provided there to ground the thinking and decisions that an advisory body might undertake and encourage holistic thought as well. Clearly, the work of the Fire Protection Commission may not deal very frequently with green spaces and ecosystems. Thank you.
Okay, is that Director Hiltz?
Sure, thanks, Chair Beamish. I'm just going to follow up. So in terms of precedents, bylaw 448 and the terms of reference, the superior document is the bylaw, and the terms of reference would be a subordinate document, so the 448 would always take precedence over terms of reference. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Director McMahon?
Is it not the role of committees and commissions to make recommendations to the board or committees?
Staff?
Thank you for your patience, Chair. I'm just reviewing in detail the wording of bylaw number 448. Staff would agree that in general that the director's statement would be correct.
Yeah, if I could comment as well. I think that the purpose should actually, if it's not going to restate the purposes in 448, it should reference them there, and that it so that they are cross-referenced from the terms of reference, cross-reference. And then your explanation in 4.6 that although that list of items there really does seem to get caught up in item number F, and that is that is consistent with the goals and objectives of the SCRD strategic plan. It is a little bit confusing, I agree, to see some of the items that are in there for other people reading this. And I wonder if that would be, to simplify it by simply saying it's consistent with the strategic plan operation. Director Hills?
Just to clarify that the commission has never had a terms of reference. Yeah. So this is kind of the first go at it to kind of align it with other commissions and committees. So that was what we were presented with the acting CAO at the time, is get it going, have something, because the last time this committee met was in November 2017, so it's kind of getting it rolling again. So I think this is kind of a kickoff kind of thing.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. Given that, if you look at 4.5, it says committee members are encouraged to report back to the appropriate standing committee and regional district staff. Typically with commissions, committees, etc., don't the minutes come forward to the appropriate committee rather than, right, but it's committee members are encouraged to report back is what it says there. But if you look at it would be 4.7D, it says forwarding the approved minutes to the Planning and Community Development Committee for further consideration, approval, or information. So the committee's reporting, not necessarily the committee members reporting back, I think. So there's some, it's just a little awkward.
I wonder if it's reasonable at this time before we actually send this to the town of Gibsons to do some more wordsmithing with it. This level are the two representatives of this SCRD comfortable with doing some more wordsmithing?
Yeah, I would like to see a little wordsmithing done just to clarify it. I take the point that Director Seegers raised, because that does seem a little confusing, and I would like to see under purposes that to make recommendations on fire services in the area. You can't make any decisions, but you can certainly make recommendations.
So the recommendation of this committee at this time be to refer this back to staff for a review and redrafting of some of the provisions. Is that appropriate? So we make that motion? Director?
Yeah, I'd be prepared to make that. There is a timing issue that this committee, if it meets more than once a year, would be a precedent setting, I think. Mm-hmm. So the next possible meeting, it looks like it's going to be in the fall, so there's going to be some delays from when this happened. And the commission reviewed these proposals and said that they were okay, so it really needs to, I guess, go back to the commission is that kind of from a process piece? So should it go to the commission? So are we asking for this to go to staff and then go back to the commission?
I think it'd go to staff. I mean, the commission could make recommendations or approve something, but it needs to align with the proper bylaws and other things that are done here, so that it should be done. Make sure, because this is actually going to go. I'm going to suggest it. Well, proof feedback from the town of Gibson. So it would go to our council table as well. We would look at it. We'd probably have the same questions again. So, Director Seegers?
I don't know what process is used here, but perhaps once some revisions are made, it could just be emailed out to the commission members and say, read this over, there's been minor changes made or whatever, or identify the changes made and see what kind of input they give you. It doesn't have to wait till a meeting in the fall necessarily.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I would be fine with that because we don't want to be calling meetings of the commission just to go over minor wording changes. Right. And the wording changes can come back to this planning committee and then go out from there to the town.
So if staff take direction on that and review that again and come back to us, or do you need a recommendation, resolution?
Thank you, Chair. A motion to refer this to staff for refinement would be helpful. Staff took notes of the specific areas of interest.
Moved by Director Hiltz, seconded by Director McMahon. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you for that. And the next one is the Egmont Annex K, Pender Harbor Advisory Planning Commission minutes, May 29. Any discussion of those? Director Lee? Annex K 169.
The APC received a subdivision application, and it was basically just a two-page report, and it confused the group in that there wasn't details about the application. For instance, they wondered if it had met the septic requirements and what the neighbors thought and all that stuff. There was nothing in that. I was hoping for when we get an application like that to review at the APC that there's some boxes that were checked to say yes, it passed this, yes, it passed that, so that they had something to talk about. I don't know how the other members of the board feel about that kind of thing, but that's what our APC thought. Was there at one point kind of a more complete report, even if the subdivision was a slam dunk?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. I think what the Advisory Planning Commission might be comparing this to or expecting would be perhaps a detailed staff report which we write for development variance permits, for example, or rezoning applications, to which Area A has seen several of those in recent months. A subdivision is more of a technical review in a sense where we are preparing our comments to pass on to the Ministry of Transportation as opposed to making a judgment call of a yes or no decision. So we do have a historic template we use with check boxes and such, which we continue to use. At some point in 2018, we changed our system of referrals to the ministry. I think with the feedback, to the APCs, the feedback we were receiving is that the checklist was not descriptive enough. So what we did is write a cover report. The cover report includes a site plan showing the development, includes aerial photo as well as a location map and a brief description of the intent of the subdivision, including the zoning. I have been in touch early this week with the chair of the APC to offer a phone call or in-person meeting to discuss how we can improve the clarity of the information, and happy to investigate that further. Thank you.
Director Lee, is that?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the final item is Annex L, and this is the Roberts Creek Advisory Planning Commission, May 13, 2019. Director Ties, anything you want to bring forward in that?
No, that's all pretty straightforward. I do note that we will be holding APC chair elections at the next APC meeting because Bill Page has had to step down from his chair position due to health reasons. So this month the APC is not meeting, so next month there will be elections for a new chair.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a sort of there's a lot of discussion of wells in here. And I was at a meeting recently with residents where one resident had a well drilled on his property last year, and the company told him that they were registering all new wells that they drill. However, when we looked on maps, his well is not registered. So I just wanted to flag that because it appears that a lot of recent wells that are being drilled may not be getting registered or certainly not turning up on mapping systems, and we really would like to know them. We've been doing a neighborhood door-to-door in the vicinity of DL 1313, and virtually none of the wells on any of those properties are registered with the province, nor do the residents want to register them, which is a separate issue. But if there are new wells being drilled, they darn well should be registered, and I was just, we should be aware. I don't know if we alert the province or what we do about this. But.
Staff, any comment on that process, or are you aware of the timing between drilling and showing up on a map? Oh, good.
What I can tell is that there used to be no obligation to register a new well. There was a voluntary process, and that changed since 2016. For domestic use, there is still no requirement to get a license. So there is an encouragement from the province to have domestic well registered, because then it can be included in any considerations of if there would be, for example, commercial well drilled in the area or whatever. Then their impacts to the private well can be considered by the province. So it's definitely encouraged by the province, but it's not mandatory to register a well.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Director Lee.
I read through the minutes here, and I was a little confused about what's an OCPC.
Director Ties.
Yes, the OCP committee is it's our special Roberts Creek thing. So yes, we have. For some reason, the OCP committee thought that if they send their minutes in, that they wouldn't make it to the attention of the directors unless they were included also in the APC minutes. So there was a request by the OCP committee to actually add the minutes from their meeting as well to the APC, and so that's what happened.
Okay, seeing no more questions, we have no communications today. We are going to go to in camera, so I'd like a motion to that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91E, I, and K of the Community Charter, which relates to the acquisition, disposition, expropriation of land or improvements. Make that motion. Moved. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Okay. Motion to adjourn this meeting. Moved. Seconded. All in favor? Inquiries. Sorry? Oh, we don't adjourn yet? Okay. So I'm sorry. Then we go to inquiries. Okay. Nothing. Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we will not adjourn yet.